our district's mission is to be the premier provider of innovative specialized services to ensure that each member district can meet the unique learning needs of its students. And we will strive to keep this mission at the center of our work in our meeting this evening. We will begin by doing introductions of board members. Sam, can you start us off, please?
Yes, Sam, representing Robbinsville 21.
Francesca Pagan Umar, representing Eden Prairie Public Schools.
Hi, I'm Heidi Marty. I represent West Tonka Public Schools.
Good evening. I'm Michelle Kuntz. I represent Orono Public Schools.
And again, I'm Crystal Brackey. I represent Richfield Public Schools.
Hi, I'm Ruthie Dallas. I represent Brooklyn Center Community Schools.
Shannon Andreessen, representing Hopkins Public Schools.
Ann Casey, proudly representing St. Louis Park.
Good evening. I'm Sarah Johansson, and I represent Wayzata Public Schools.
Jackie Mosqueda Jones, representing Osseo Area School District 279.
Thank you. And I also want to acknowledge Michael Birdman, who is joining from afar this evening. Hi, Michael. Michael is going to be our new representative from Edina Public Schools and has participated in onboarding with members of the district staff, but is unable to be here this evening, so is informally participating, and then will officially take the oath of school board office at our next meeting. So Michael, thank you for being here with us. Also want to acknowledge Superintendent Marcy Dowd here at her first meeting since taking the helm of our district. We're so happy to have you, and many members of the district staff who are with us here in person and online. The first item of business is approval of the general meeting agenda. And I just wanted to make one note that does not require any amendment, but in the board book online official version of the agenda, you will see item 7.4 is update on summer school, and that just did not make it to the print copy that some of you might have in front of you. So just wanted to acknowledge that 7.4 update on summer school is part of the agenda, and we will be discussing it this evening. So just wanted to make sure everybody was clear on that. With that, do we have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Francesca Pagan Umar and a second by Michelle Kuntz. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye, and the agenda is approved. Next, we have audience opportunity to speak. And this evening, we have members of Local 284 with us. And speaking on the group's behalf is Bryce Koenig. So Bryce, I welcome you up to the microphone, and you may begin whenever you are ready.
Good evening, 287 school board members. Some of you may recognize me from a recent hearing regarding a grievance filed on behalf of our facilities members, which we are still currently involved in at the state mediation level. To those of you who attended that hearing, hello, and thank you for your time once again. To those of you I haven't met yet, it is nice to meet you. My name is Bryce Koenig. I work for District 287 as a skilled maintenance employee at our West Education Center location. I also support Local 284 as a union steward. Today, I come to you with an issue I believe both parties have an interest in finding a timely solution. Elected as a steward, I have a responsibility to bring forth the concerns of our membership. As a 287 employee, I have a duty to bring forth concerns of our workforce. My hope is for this call to be a moment for unity, a place for understanding, and an opportunity for resolution before greater challenges become our reality. We are here today to communicate the essential need for a more equitable contract, which includes a cost of living adjustment, both retroactively and prospectively. Our bargaining team decided to conduct a survey with our members to better understand their top priorities in this economic environment. Our findings were startling, to say the least, and I consider it a privilege to be their voice at a time they feel they need it most. I'm going to begin with the most encouraging results of our survey. When asked, do you enjoy working in our school district? 86.5% of our respondents said yes. 13.5% answered somewhat. Not one person said no. We should take a moment to be proud of this fact. It shows we happily support each other, the district, and our mission. When asked overall, Are you satisfied with your job? 59.5% responded yes. 40.5% replied somewhat. Again, not one person said no. Ladies and gentlemen, we are doing something right when it comes to being a 287 employee. Let this be our continued goal and the common ground we share when looking for solutions. Now I will present to you the challenges our district faces, and I believe by the end of this, you too will see our cause for alarm. When asked to rate your workload on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being too little and 10 being completely overwhelmed, only one member rated less than a 5. 28.6% responded an 8, 20% responded a 9, and 17.1% responded a 10, completely overwhelmed. Meaning altogether 65.7% felt an overwhelming workload of 8 or greater. At these rates, employee burnout is a very real concern and should be a significant focus to this body and district management. Pairing this concerning trend with our next stat, it is not hard to see the conflict setting up on the horizon. When asked, do you feel you are compensated fairly for the work you currently do? A staggering 56.8% of respondents said no. Another 32.4% said somewhat, meaning 89.2% of those polled believe there is need for improvement in reaching fairer wages for this bargaining unit. This should be sounding alarm bells for everyone listening to this right now. While even one person feeling unfairly compensated for his or her work is worth attention, these numbers are far too large to continue to ignore. Lastly, I'm going to speak to what this means for the district if they choose to ignore this warning. When asked, do you plan to continue working for the district in the next 2 years? 40% said yes, 5.7% responded no, and 54.3% said if a COLA increase doesn't happen, I plan to look for other employment. Think about that for a moment. Over half said they plan to find other employment because this career is not keeping up with the cost of living. They're finding it harder and harder to afford to live. This is a pay equity crisis in the making, and it is a workforce shortage crisis in the making. Simply put, district wages are not competitive enough to retain 284 skill sets. Additionally, they're not competitive enough to attract new talent to replace employees as they leave. I encourage all of you to speak with department heads that are looking to hire and ask how many applicants they have been receiving. I know this because it is the remaining team being asked to pick up the workloads caused by staffing shortages, inevitably leading to a feeling of being overwhelmed and perpetuating a negative feedback loop of employee burnout, occupational scouting, and resignation. Decide to do something now instead of waiting for the next crisis. 86.5% enjoy working in our district. Knowing this, we should do something for our members trying to keep up with the cost of living. The last thing any of us want to see is for capable employees who enjoy their work to be forced out while trying to make ends meet. We are a unique learning environment serving students with complex disabilities and extraordinary mental health needs. Every person in our district is instrumental in shaping our students to prepare them for their lives as functioning members of our society. This crucial responsibility demands that we too are unique in our job performance. We should be compensated and treated as such. This bargaining unit was and continues to be fundamental to the district's mission in the ever-changing landscape that is special education. The time to do what is right is ever present, but the right time to do what is right is narrow. Following a global pandemic and in the midst of strenuous economic conditions, the time for our membership is without question right now. We are proposing an immediate, effective increase of a 2% COLA to help our members in the interim while waiting to meet again for negotiations. Also, please grant the district negotiation team the authority to settle an equitable contract that honors the good work we do here so we can remain a part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you. And as I know you know and has been communicated, we do not engage in open discussion after public comment. I just want to acknowledge the awkwardness of that because I think it's important to say we know that it's an uncomfortable dynamic. But I do want to share on behalf of the board that we appreciate you being here, sharing your concerns and this information, and we do look forward to working with you in the negotiations process. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will move on to our next item of business, which is approval of the,
I just had a question. Do we have a printed copy of that?
I have Bryce's contact information from the request, so I can send him an email and see if that can be shared
I
back.
thought there were important numbers that I didn't
Absolutely.
necessarily capture.
We will make sure that we get that. I'm sure
Thank
they'll
you.
be glad to share it. Thank you. So moving to the consent agenda containing routine business items. These are items that we pass in a block unless there is an item that a board member requests be removed for individual consideration. If there is that request, now would be the time to make it. Otherwise, we can entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Oh, Juanine.
I'm sorry, Juanine. We did that. Yep. No, that's okay. It was moved by Francesca, seconded by Michelle.
Chair Brockie, if I may, there was something on the consent, I believe it's the consent agenda to rescind leave.
That is the next item after the consent agenda. You're fine.
Mind.
We have a motion by Sam Sant, but I don't believe that I at least caught a second before we paused for a moment.
I will second it.
Okay, I'm going to give the second to Jackie Mosqueda Jones. So motion by Sam Sant, second by Jackie Mosqueda Jones. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye and the consent agenda is approved. So now we move to a recommendation to rescind prior approval leave of absences. Ann Becker has shared context in our board packet about this request. Ann, is there anything that you would like to share with the board before we consider this item?
Nothing additional, but happy to take any questions if there are any.
I do have a question. I wanted to know if the members, the employees who went on leave, if they received any type of benefit, either financial, wiping out overdue sick days, or any other type of thing that they received as part of that process.
Their leave would have started on Monday if the approval of it weren't rescinded. So nothing has happened with regard to the leave as of yet.
And there's been no benefit to them in any of the things they already have in place.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I had a clarifying question around, is this a unrequested leave of absence or requested?
No, it is not an unrequested leave of absence. That we would not ask you to rescind. It is a voluntary leave that was requested and approved.
Okay, given the nature of this request and that is rescinding previous action, I do have language from Anne that we can use to move the policy. So I will read it out loud, and then if somebody is comfortable making a motion from that, we can go from there. I, whomever follows, move that the board rescind its approval of the leaves of absence requested by the employees named in item 5.11 and approved by the board on the dates listed in 5.11 as requested by the named employees and district administration.
I'll move as presented.
Second.
So we have a motion by Ann Casey. Was the second Sarah Johansson? Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? This is a roll call vote. So Shannon Andreessen, our clerk, will call each individual board member.
Thank you, Chair Brockie. Director Sant.
Yes.
Director Umar.
Yeah.
Director Marty.
Yes.
Director Coons.
Yes.
Chair Brockie.
Yes.
Director Dallas.
Yes.
Andreessen votes aye. Director Casey.
Aye.
Director Johansson
Yes.
and Director Jones, Mosqueda Jones.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion to rescind is approved. We've moved next to the superintendent's report, where we have several items where our superintendent is going to share with us just an overview of what her first almost 2 months now in the district have brought. So we are going to start specifically on that topic, update on her first few months.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So some of you have been part of the process for hiring the superintendents, and some of you are new to the board. So before I start with what I've been up to and causing trouble for the last 2 months, let me just share a little bit about myself. So I have been in education for over 20 years. I actually started as an adventure-based therapist and then moved into public education. What I hold to my heart is that I started the pathway through as a paraprofessional in special education, a teacher in special education, and then went on to administration. And so when I think about my role as a leader is to make sure I bring all of those lenses in when I think about all of the staff that support our district. It has been personally a wonderful transition for me, professionally a wonderful transition. The staff here, the executive team has been very welcoming and helping build my background knowledge on 287 when I ask 1,001 questions. So I'm very grateful for that. Personally, my husband is a science teacher and we have 3 adult children. And if you come to one of the opening presentations at one of our sites, you'll hear a little bit more about me personally and how I lead and what I hold dear in my leadership. So what I've been doing these last 2 months is listening, observing, learning a lot, and taking the time to watch students in our space, watch our staff interact with each other. I've been to all the summer school sites. During my transition, I had the gift of extra time in transitioning into this position before July 1. And so I was able to visit the sites and some of the care and treatment sites, but I wasn't able to go to all of them. So I did go to the summer while they had summer school, a few extra care and treatment sites that I have not seen. I've met with leaders outside of District 287, members, the superintendents had individual meetings on within the district, in your districts, talking about what's working with 287, where would you like us to go? What are some things that you have want us to think about or want me to look at as a superintendent, and how do you prefer communication? I've also met with a lot of staff. We had welcome back with NSO, and today there was an activity with Local 284, and so I spent time listening to staff. Honestly, I've probably added more miles and all the rings that I've done my 10,000 steps ever since I started July 1. So that's been a good thing. I just want to share a few of the themes that I've heard amongst the staff and internal and external stakeholders. And it's really the commitment to each other and the commitment to our students. And you heard it even tonight. That's loud and clear. And that is an amazing thing that it is pervasive amongst everybody that works in this district. The superintendents, the directors of special education, stakeholders say the service that's provided in 287 is top notch. And everybody's very pleased with the care and support that they've given to, 287 staff have given to our students. And they really want to continue the focus on equity and increasing student outcomes. So some of the areas that they want me to look at and continue to talk about is communication, both internal and external. And so making sure that the good things and the things that we're wrestling with, our stakeholders are aware and have an opportunity to have voice and input in it, in some of the decisions. They talked about, looking at the finances, that the costing of the program as an intermediate, that we are one of the most expensive, and just needing to know more of the why. What is it that we do? What is it that our students need? And are we getting the outcomes we hope to with the support that we are giving our students? And lastly, they said, please, mental health is something that we always have to continue to think about, equity and mental health for our staff and our students. And so those are themes amongst the stakeholders, and I will continue to listen, to learn. As more staff come on board, I'll have targeted meetings with different groups of staff members And each of you, I offer up an individual meeting just to get to know you, get to know me, you can get to know me, and how I can better support you as the superintendent of District 27. And that is my update.
Thank you, Marcy. Just any initial questions or comments?
Welcome. Happy to have you.
Thank you. Well said, Heidi. Okay, with that, we will move on to the board weekly newsletter, which is connected to that theme of communications that you just named.
Absolutely. So you should have experienced 2 newsletters. I hope that you found them useful. One thing that communication theme came out loud and clear. And so our team actually will help produce a weekly newsletter with just the happenings of the week. They'll be high level. It'll also be shared with the superintendents and in our leadership team. You also will continue to receive board alerts for things that are for an emergency or time sensitive, and things that you may need to know in regards to the board meeting. But those are the 3 main ways in which we'll communicate and making sure that everybody knows updated information on what's going on in 287. There's a lot of great things.
Thank you. I know I already have been excited to get the first 2 issues and have found it really helpful. So I'm excited that you're starting that. Any comments, questions? Jackie?
Yeah, I have a question that I may have missed in the email. I really love this idea. I think it's phenomenal. Do we have a shared Google Drive that this can be stored in so we can go back if we need to look up things? Can we
We
do
can
that?
work on that, absolutely.
That's what I found helpful in
Mhm.
Osseo is we have a shared board drive so that we can go back to documents. Otherwise, I was looking through emails like crazy.
I'll let you do that.
Yeah.
Thank you for that recommendation.
Thank you.
I'd echo what Jackie said. I love this. When I opened up my email and I was like, oh goodness, things are changing. All right. Don't always love that. I just figured stuff out. And then I was like, oh my gosh, it's visually clear. I read the titles of what was coming up. So I was prepared for how much I was going to read through and what it would be. And that set the tone and the stage for me. So I already had my ideas about what would I want to know in that area before I went to it. Then I'd read through it and all the things I was looking for were there. So I was like, okay, I don't need to ask more. This is complete. But it would help me in the future because if something that title would make me think of wasn't there by the time I get through to there, I could jot that down. And then the helpful links are very helpful.
I have to thank Juanine.
Silent cheer.
Brilliant.
Okay, I don't see any other questions or comments, so we will move on to the update on back to school planning. So exciting that our students and staff are coming back into our buildings. Go ahead, Ben.
1 second.
The technology and the fingers also connect.
Yes.
All right, good evening. Board Chair Brockie, Superintendent Dowd, members of the board. Thank you for allowing me to be here with you this evening to share a little bit of an update on our planning for back to school 2022-2023. There's 3 parts of this presentation, and I have about 7 or 8 slides for you tonight. First, I want to talk about how we're preparing our buildings and our leaders to welcome all of our staff into our buildings next week. I'll touch on our plans for the types of training and topics that we'll work with our staff on next week. And then I'll share a few key messages that we think are important for all of our stakeholders, all of you here, as well as all of our staff, students, families, as we welcome them back. I do want to give a shout out to the facility staff who have worked hard to make sure that our buildings are ready to go for welcoming a new set of students into our buildings. It's a lot of work. And as many of you know, that in our district in particular, some of the nuances of our buildings and our structures, and at times, sometimes the damages in our buildings requires a lot of work. But our facility staff are working hard to make sure that the indoor spaces, the outdoor spaces are ready and welcoming to make sure that we can, again, invite our students into our spaces. I also want to go back before I go any further and talk a little bit about our strategic goals. This work dates back to late spring, when a team of leaders here from the district, and then subsequently, as we engaged other stakeholders as part of the conversation, other leaders across the district. We knew, of course, that we were going to start the year and we're going to continue to work on our strategic priorities. Those strategic priorities of employee well-being, evidence-based instruction, trauma and healing-centered practices, and racial equity are part of all of those priorities so that we can achieve the outcomes for students that we want in the center of that graphic. But we also wanted to make sure that we could not just talk about strategic priorities kind of in the concept, but also be able to operationalize what those priorities would look like as we came into the school year. And specifically, we wanted to be focused on how we were going to direct our work on our strategic priorities to improve those outcomes for our students. One of those goals that we developed late spring and into the summer and into the year is to make sure that we are going to reduce the number of critical incidents that we have in our buildings. You can think of a critical incident as a call to 911, a student who leaves the building, a restrictive procedure where we physically held a student, or anything else like that, that would be a large incident. We do have a definition, but to give you a feel for what we're talking about. And then we wanted to make sure as part of that work that we were setting metrics and goals for all of our students, but we were also very specific about the I and the E in our SMART-T goals, inclusion and equity, and that we are addressing the issues of gaps between our BIPOC students and our white students in all of the work that we're doing. So we made sure that we set measurable goals, and we made sure that we're closing the gap as we're doing that work. Similarly, in goal 2, where we want to see an increase in reading growth for all of our students, we also recognize that in this district, like districts across the state and country, that we have a gap to close. So simply saying that 5% for all of our students wouldn't close any of the gaps that are persistent. So we set a more ambitious goal with more specific strategies to help us reach that 8% for our BIPOC students. So with that as a little bit of a backdrop, we've spent a lot of time this summer working with our leaders. That we know that the better prepared our leaders are to lead, the better off they're going to be when they welcome staff back on Monday. So we spent time, most recently a few weeks ago, at our instructional and operational leaders retreat, what we call IOL. And we went off campus to make sure that we had time to hear a little bit from Marcy and her welcome and her direction for our district. To make sure that we were going to be able to be dialed in for our work on racial equity and developing our cultural competence. We spent time to make sure that we were collaborating and working together and getting to know each other in some cases so that we could do the hard work that's in front of us. We also made sure during that retreat with Ann's help and her leadership that all of our supervisors, and they were all supervisors in the room, all knew effective supervision strategies and growth strategies for our employees. So yes, it is about evaluations and making sure that we're conducting those properly, but we'll also use that as a tool to make sure that we're supporting the growth of our educators and staff. And lastly, Jacob Borsch led us through all of the updates and improvements that we have on safety. I'll touch on that again in just a little bit, but we'd be happy to come back with in more depth at some point as well. We're really happy with the direction of the work that we're doing around safety. Our site-based leaders, our principals, but not just our principals and assistant principals, our ESPs, teachers, social workers, lots of other staff. They've been together for 4 full days for us to, again, make sure that they're both prepared with the knowledge and skill to be successful this year. And in the case of our school improvement retreat, which was 3 of those 4 days, that they each had measurable SMART T goals, again, the I and the E as a required part of that school improvement plan. So all of our leaders walked out there during those 3 days with a draft, at least, of their school improvement plan, ones that will be finalized in some cases over the next couple of weeks. But we also made sure that during these days that our staff were continuing our work on being trauma informed, and understanding racial trauma. Know that if we're going to serve our students in the way that we need to, understanding how we're going to support and respond to their mental health needs is crucial to the work. I borrowed a line in bullet number 3 here on cultivating genius. One of the messages that's from Goldie Muhammad in her framework on culturally responsive teaching. But one of the messages that we wanted specifically for our leaders is to think about how are they cultivating the genius in each of our students. What does that look like inside of classrooms and hallways and offices? And how will our leaders make sure that when we're talking about culturally responsive teaching and learning, they know what that is and they can support that work? I'm also really proud of the work that this district with Kim Helgeson and her team and others have done on the data dashboard. Hope to be back and share that with you as well, that from where we were a few years ago to where we are now, and our leaders now being able to use that to set those goals and specifically to drill down and disaggregate that data in multiple ways. It's really important work for our district, so we spent some time on that. Before I leave this slide, I want to reference that 4th day, which was under Tanya Allen's leadership on mental health and trauma. A full day for our principals, assistant principals, and others, specifically working to make sure that we were doing that part of the strategic priority work that we needed to. And that, again, that our leaders were ready for welcoming staff. Back to school week itself, as you might suspect, follows our strategic priorities. So I don't have a lot of detail here, but I think that the takeaway that I'd like to give you is that when we welcome staff back to work next week, that they'll hear from, as Marcy mentioned earlier, they'll hear from Superintendent Dowd at all of the sites and here at the district office. Radius will be back to help lead our racial equity work. We're excited about that, making sure that we're continuing to move our equity work forward. The literacy and assessments and mental health and trauma and safety protocols all follow our strategic priorities and our key messages that I'll share again in just a minute. Like all of your districts, our staff have their own time to make sure their classrooms, offices, hallways, documents, meetings are all done. And they have time at their sites for our buildings to welcome them and build team building and staff meetings and those sorts of things. I don't want to miss the 4 days of our new staff academy, which started on Tuesday of this week. Today was day 3. Tomorrow's the last day. We welcomed about 45 new staff members over the last couple of days to our district. And I also want to shout out to Marisa Nathan and John Voss, who coordinated and led that work. The early returns is that our staff really appreciated their focus on instructional strategies and practices, and the way that we made sure that we had different supports for our mental health staff with Tanya. All of the returns that we've heard so far have been very positive on what we call NSA. Key messages. One, I just mentioned the top one, that we're going to continue to make sure that people know and that our actions speak to our work on racial equity. We're not going to lose track of that as we enter into another school year. We want to reemphasize the focus on quality instruction. And I don't want to imply here that we were not doing quality instruction before. But of course, we've had 2+ years of COVID interrupted learning where we've sent students home, they've worked on computers, we brought them back, they went back, we did some of this and we did some of that. And it was hard to get a footing. And not just with COVID, But the murder of George Floyd and other issues around our community caused challenges for all of our staff and students in our community. And then we had our own fair share of things that we worked through as a district as well, specifically in the spring. So I don't want to imply that we weren't doing quality instruction before, only to say that we want to reemphasize our commitment to making sure that the instruction that we provide to all of our students in this district is evidence-based, is of high quality, and that we're striving to meet the needs of our member district students and the outcomes they expect for our students. I mentioned the last one a couple times throughout these last few minutes, and that again is our continued emphasis on this part of our strategic priority, and that's mental health, trauma healing centered practices, and specifically understanding the impact of racial trauma. Not for any other reason that I needed another slide for safety, because I wanted to just show you an early graphic, which I think is pretty hard to see, but hopefully you have it in your packet, or I can get this to you another way. We've taken the layers of protection borrowed from COVID and reframed that around layers of protection for safety. What we know internally, what we know from the experts who've worked with our district, is that the best approach to safety is to have a layered approach, to not go after one type of strategy, but have many different types of strategies that you can layer and close as many of the gaps as what you can. So the graphic is the way that we can communicate those varied layers of protection and how we're seeking to close as many gaps as we can. One of those, as you know, is the Evolve Weapons Detection System. That's one part of those layers of protection. But we're starting this year at the 4 education centers with Evolve Weapons Detection Systems, which we believe will help in a number of ways. I apologize because I don't believe that this is in your version. I saw it on a street sign, and it looked familiar to me. And I had to go back and drive by and read it again, and I captured it to bring back here, so I'm a little late. I apologize. But this is, if you've read her poem or you've heard her poem, and I'm sure that all of you have, this is about the middle section of that poem from The Hill We Climb. And this is Amanda Gorman. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. And as I read that and I reflected on that part of her poem, I thought it was exactly what back to school was all about. That right in front of us, right before us, is this brand new year that we get to define however we choose to define. From this point forward, we stand in front of this school year. We do that work together as a team in this room and a team across our district. So with that, I will invite my colleagues to help me answer any questions and see if there are any from the board.
Thank you, Ben. That was great. Really helpful just to get the overview here at the start of the school year. So yes, we'll open it up for questions or comments from board members.
And just a question. I would love to get a copy of that layers of support. I think it would be really informative.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing Amanda Gorman into the presentation.
Just glad I figured out which one.
You mentioned weapons detection system. Can you describe it better?
I can a little bit. I will. I'll be absent a lot of details, but I'll do my best here, and certainly can come back to you with more information as well. The district is working with, or worked with, and continue to work with Evolve Weapons Detection System. If you saw one of these systems, you would recognize it as something roughly similar to a metal detector. There's 2 stanchions on either side. They're about 4 to 5 feet apart. There's no overhead part. And maybe some of you have even seen these exact ones. They are at Allianz Field and at other places around town. But again, they're about 4 or 5 feet apart. There's no overhead. There's just stanchions on either side. This is not a metal detector, though. This is a weapons detection system. So multiple people can pass through at any given time. So you can walk through with 1 person or 2 people, or 5 or 8 people, however many you can fit through that space, I suppose. And it's looking specifically for weapons. It's looking for firearms and those sorts of things. And then it'll use technology to alert somebody who is watching all of the video, all of the people walking through those stanchions. They're getting alerted on an iPad type device if there's an alert to be had. If there's no alert, then people just keep walking.
And they'll be installed in all our school buildings.
They're installed at our 4 education center buildings: South Education Center, West Education Center, and Bremer Education Center. 4.
Very good, thank you.
Yes.
Ben, other than the weapons detection system, are there other elements of this that are new? Or have we been doing some elements of all of these things?
There, maybe it's a little bit both. So hard to see on my computer screen. There are some things that are new and a little bit different. So we've always had, I'll just give you an example. We've always, of course, had visitors when they come in, they've either signed in some cases on a physical piece of paper or that they've done so electronically. We have changed systems now. And so as an example of that upgrade that we're working hard to implement for the start of the school year, we now have a Raptor system, and Raptor replaced a couple of things in our district. But one of the things that replaced is visitor management. And actually, you may have walked by it because there's one sitting out now on the front desk right out here as you walk into the building. But that'll ask folks to scan their driver's license, or they can, if they don't have one or some sort of other identification, that's okay too. We just ask them to enter in on the kiosk, and that's changed the way that we do our visitor management. It allows us to go back to, I believe, some like sexual offender databases and things like that so that we can scan for that. So one example that we've always had, but we're improving it and it's recognized on this layer of protection is that Raptor system. It's also replaced what we call, or not what we call, but what it is called Crisis Go, which is our crisis notification system. Raptor also is replacing that. Raptor's also, just again as an example, used, I believe, in Robbinsdale and several of our member districts.
Thanks.
Been a question about the Raptor system. Osseo uses it as well. I think I just heard you say, because I was busy looking at your, zooming in on your thing, that if they don't have an ID, that they can sign in manually. My concern is some people may not want to show an ID because they're undocumented or whatever reason. And the biggest concern we had in Osseo when putting up the Raptor system is that balance between welcoming and safety. And so I'm assuming you all have that discussion with the racial equity. Any insight from that, or?
I don't know that I have any specific insight for you. You're right, though. I mean, we do want to make sure there's the option to sign in, and that is an option. You can just kind of press the button and slip over to the other port of the platform. I don't have further insight, though, on any conversations that have taken place.
So do they get just a different sticker or something?
No.
I would think it's the
Same
same
sticker.
sticker
Same
because it's
sticker.
coming out of the same.
Just doesn't have the picture and stuff
You
on
know,
it,
ma'am?
probably.
Yeah, it's just
It's a
doesn't have
generic.
the driver's license printout on it that you have.
Yep, I hear you.
One other part, just back to Heidi's question, if I can, one other thing that is not new, but not entirely new, but is part of what we're addressing in safety is security cameras at North Education Center, that there'll be new cameras there for the start of the school year as well. Previous cameras were at the end of their life. They were 8 to 10 years old. So that's providing us a improved way to use security cameras.
Go ahead.
Thank you. We'll come back and after school starts with a more in-depth presentation regarding safety. It is a topic amongst public schools, and we'd like to share a little bit more details of our new systems, and so expect that in the near future.
I think the two things that I was going to share, one, maybe we will talk about in more depth in September, but I just wanted to say how much I appreciate that the weapons detection system is not just for our students, but it's actually for anybody who is entering our buildings. And that feels like a very important thing for us to be clear about and for us to be consistent about. And then just wanted to appreciate the alignment with the strategic priorities and how you shared the way that is being incorporated into the back to school planning and what we're in the middle of right now. It's helpful. And I just especially appreciate cultivating the genius. That feels like a really beautiful way to start this school year. And I'm going to try to hold on to that for a long time. So thank you. Just looking to see if there's any other final questions or comments.
Ditto what she said.
All right, thank you so much, Ben. We will move on now to update on summer school with Elizabeth.
Good evening, Chair Rocky and members of the board and Superintendent Dowd. I'm so glad to be here. You have a document, what the board needs to know, and I'm not going to read it to you, but I'll just give you some highlights. First of all, I just want to say that this week is like a week full of excitement and anticipation and nervousness and talking with at New Staff Academy. And I actually kind of teared up, just like I did when Ben mentioned the celebrating the genius and then the Amanda Gorman quote. I was just sitting there and I think I'm just feeling that way, right? It's coming. Anyways, but what I'm going to give you is a little retrospective on the fun, great learning that happened this summer across our very different programs and meeting the needs of over 4,100 students across every one of the supports we provide in the summer. So our academies provide credit recovery. Our students receiving special education services qualify for extended school year, so we support them. We also had recovery services that occurred. And of course, our Northern Star Online, NSO, provides a lot of credit recovery, both through IS and through tuition-based programming. We had a few students that we partnered with you who had aged out or exited special education services, but there were still some areas that we wanted to shore up given the last couple of years. And so those students were also a part of our recovery services in partnership again with the resident district. We had a lot of opportunities to support learning in many ways, but we really focused in on experiential learning, project-based learning, community-based learning, and spent a great deal of time planning and focusing on that. And I have to do a shout out for our our director, Tanya Allen, because she kind of coordinated the special funds that were allocated to us for community-based learning. And that was no small feat, but she had that in her bucket and made sure that all the schools had access and they got that planning. But it wasn't unusual to roll into Ann Bremer during extended school year and hear drumming, where students were practicing their targeted focused IEP goals that had for ESY with drumming, and it was really fun. They had a great time. When I was over at West, I actually got to try out some food. The students worked through an integrated social studies and English language arts project through culinary, looking at cultural exploration of their own heritage and background, and doing research and serving the main dishes, which was traditional dishes. That was awesome. Loved that. When it wandered over to South Education Center during our academy's work there, And there was project learning that leveraged art with social studies. And students developed and illustrated a Black history timeline. We did the research and put together these timelines. Just, you know, it was just, I got goosebumps. It was great. Over at North Education Center, there was a lot of focus on reinforcing and strengthening those IEP goals focused on social emotional learning and social interactions, as well as the targeted literacy and those other goal areas. But they did a lot of that through group-based learning, which for many of our students isn't easy, to be in a little larger group, to interact. And on the last day, actually Superintendent Dowd and I got to witness some really good times on a inflatable water slide and the glee that was occurring with making sure that Mr. Antoine got wet. So it just was fun. And over at Omegon in our care and treatment programs, they learned their math or worked on their credit recovery in math and the math standards through Math in Nature. It's an extended unit that actually was put together, initiated by our assistant principal there, who's a former math teacher, and she worked with the team, and she'd be happy to share that if anybody has any interest, because it's her passion. And then at Headway, we had English language arts standards addressed through music and lyrics, and they embedded the SEL as well as how music generates feelings in us. It was cool. I mean, there was great excitement, great energy. It was a good summer programming, and we were worried about staff. It was hard, you know, many of our staff admittedly, like many of us, felt like they needed some extended break this summer. So we got pretty creative about shared positions so that we could incentivize a little bit. You know, you can partner with this other teacher and split the time up, pre-planned, and we provided them some additional planning time to make that work. And then honestly, we provided, you all approved, I believe you, yeah, I know you did. We approved an incentive for folks that completed their assignment for whatever summer programming. That was about 380 staff, 99.9% of them earned the stipend, which means people really hung in there, whatever their assignment was. We're committed to our students, as our staff always are, and hung in there with the students and provided just a really energizing summer of learning. That's my report. I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you so much. It's a really helpful glimpse into something that I feel like I had very little sense of, is the summer programs that we do here. So I really appreciate it.
I probably forgot to mention that we support in 6-member districts and 2 charter schools that are within those 2-member districts, targeted services and credit recovery for 2,129 students. So what we do is we organize that with them, assure that the staff, that they have a process for hiring staff, and then we do all the reporting. So, all right, sorry.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you so much for these reports, and to all of you. I know it's a lot of work and you have your plates full already before you even start the day-to-day work. Something that's missing for me, and I think people know this is one of my passions, is, are we going to get on a bus pretty soon?
It's coming. We've got a schedule and everything.
Good.
Yeah.
Excellent. Make me really happy. Oh, are we invited?
I think so. I think so. I think it's specifically for the board.
You're special. Yes.
Thank you.
Sarah.
Thank you so much. I think I have your goosebumps now too. It just really sounded so fun and so focused, and really embodied a commitment to both our students and our staff, and embracing all that summer has to offer. So it takes a lot of work to be that creative, but it sounds really incredible. So thank you to you and the staff.
Dr. Rogers, your gleeful, joyful, tickled enthusiasm to me is the stuff that as a person who also worked in special ed, but as a mom now too, your ideal of what you want in educators is that. And so hearing it come from you after 2 years of COVID and a full summer and very, very hard challenges we had here, that's the stuff that I think trickles down and inspires the other educators. So I really appreciate that vibe from you. And if that happened to be some special coffee you had, if it's caffeine,
It's all natural.
I also had a question for Mr. Magris. I didn't ask when you presented before, but the race equity trainings that are coming up with what is her name escaping? Radius. I know they're for staff. Is it possible for board members to observe any of it?
Defer to Marcy on this. So
We-
you're asking if board members to attend the racial equity trainings that are happening at our sites?
So you can attend the ones at the sites. We will have district-wide for the district service center. So we'll send out dates that would be, have enough space and availability to participate. So we'll get that out too. Thank you for asking.
Any other comments or questions? Juanine?
I did see that. I wasn't sure if that meant us. Okay.
Thank you.
I will call you next time.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
And our last item in the superintendent update is proposed changes to the organizational chart. So Marcy will give us a brief overview of that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you heard a wonderful report from Ben regarding the 3 priorities for the school year and that intentional focus. And please know that was all done in the spring prior to me coming on board. But I love the intentionality. I love the focus. And what we have been talking about significantly is that equity doesn't sit in a silo over here. When we're talking about instruction, we're talking about culturally relevant instruction. We're talking about trauma-informed practices and that it's embedded in everything we do. And we're cross-teaming to ensure that it is just part of what we do in 287. It's the work that we do, and it's not a great workshop you attend. It's how we are and how we will continue to act as a leadership team. So when I look at those 3 priorities and I think about the lifting that we have to do and continue to do, now I know the strategic plan needs to be updated. And I can't imagine that equity be removed from it, student outcomes be removed from it, or continued trauma practices, because that's our work. And that's what 287 is about. That's what our mission and vision is about. But we will let stakeholders continue to provide input as we develop the new strategic plan. But and in the process, we really need to think about what do we need to do as a leadership team, as departments to move this district forward. And I had the chance to sit with both Elizabeth and Ben and talk about structures. How are we aligning as a leadership team? Are we working? They all work collaboratively. That's the best thing about the team. But does everybody need to be at every meeting? Or are we really aligning our systems to say that if you are working with the student information system, it's connected to the student dashboard of outcomes. It's connected to teaching and learning. It's connected to the professional development of our leaders and our staff. That alignment is critical. And you saw it as Ben shared regarding the 3 focuses. And when you look at the continuous improvement plans of either the departments or the buildings, you will see that throughout. And that's really critical because it brings a sense of collective efficacy that only together can we get this done, and an intense focus. We can't have 100 goals. We've got to go deep. And what I think that COVID and just a lot of impacts in the districts across, besides 287, across the nation, is that we've been maintaining. And now we have built an enormous foundation in 287 around instruction, culturally relevant instruction, equity, and trauma-informed practices. We have to operationalize that consistently in everything we do in the classroom. So that if you walk in, if I walk in, I can notice the best practices being executed. I can see the interaction of staff and students with each other. And that is something you feel and see when you enter in. And that's the excitement I feel with this team and the direction that we're going, that's really strong. But when I looked at my team and our team, we looked at is our work aligned to support what needs to get done? And do we have enough voices in this space around those three areas to really promote and lift it in the decision-making space that occurs at table? And so in my organization chart, one thing I thought that was really missing was the mental health and trauma-informed practices. It's not that the team is not implementing or working on trauma-informed practice, providing professional development, but that needed to be elevated and heightened. And we have one of the best in the best here that work at 287, and that's Tanya Allen. And so what you'll see in my organizational chart is elevating that voice, that work into the executive leadership team. And so that is my recommendation, is that we bring Tanya as an executive director and we elevate trauma-informed practices.
Thank you for that, Marcy.
Absolutely.
Questions or comments? Francesca.
I would say that I very much appreciate the decision to do this, because as we all have become very aware, the need for comprehensive care of students. It's their learning goals, it's their social emotional goals, it's having space for them to work on their mental health needs. There's not a lot of other places where our students can go. So I definitely think this was a very wise decision.
Thank you.
So I appreciate it. And congratulations.
Janet.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo that sentiment, but also to say that I like the name because it has student in it. And that's one of the things I've always been impressed by when you address the board, Tanya, is you're so student focused. And I feel like it is essential to have that voice as a constant part of the leadership of this district. So I am so excited about this. Thank you for stepping up and in to the work.
Ruthie.
Thank you, Chair. I want to say I'm excited too, and congratulations, Tanya. I think it was a great decision made here in looking at the overall makeup of leadership and to recognize the need to add diversity to that as well as the expertise that's needed for the district. So I think it was a very wise choice, and just want to say thank you.
Hey.
I just want to say thank you, Tanya, for accepting this position and being willing to go forward. And I also appreciate the restructuring. I think it will be helpful, and I have the utmost respect for this whole team and how you work together. And I think putting you all on that same, working that much closer together is a good thing. So.
Okay, we could entertain a motion to approve the organizational chart.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Shannon Andreessen and a second by Sam Sant. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye and the motion is approved. With that, we will move into our business services and labor relations report. This evening, we have two financial reports. So May is going to step up to the mic here for a little bit. First is approval of our routine monthly finance report.
So good evening, Chair Brackey, board members, and Superintendent Dowd. So this is the June 2022 monthly report. June's the end of a quarter, so I'm standing up here giving you a formal report. Just a reminder that the June amounts on your report are on a cash basis, right? So those are not our year-end final amounts. We'll be continuing to do our receivables, payables, and accrual entries right up until October when our auditors arrive. So with that being said, the revenues on a cash basis at the end of June were 82.4%. That is higher than the prior year's cash basis. The expenditures were at 97.4%, which is a budget, which is also higher than the prior 2 years. Cash was just above last year's June total amounts. Investments totaled, I have to look at my note now, $18,793,461 and earned interest of $13,470. So, and now we'll get into our student ADMs for the month of June. So this is kind of a year-end summary on the student ADMs. So for their ALC programs, their enrollment peaked in November at 230 ADMs and was at 223.85 at year end. The planning numbers for our ALC program were 280, so that final ADM was 56.145 below our planning and 43.63 below last year. We have seen a 2-year decrease in our ALC enrollment of 92 ADMs. The Northern Star online program was budgeted at 845 ADMs. The final June ADMs on the report were 806.98, which is 37.97 ADMs lower than budget. Just a reminder that the NSO supplemental program revenue is generated upon credit completion at 88% of the full ADM. The other 12% goes to the resident district. And then our career and tech pathways peaked in September, and they ended the year with 77.51 ADMs, which was 27 below planning and 14 higher than last year. For our special ed programs, our ADMs were also lower than our planned ADMs. We peaked in April at 439. And at the end of the year, we were at 438.69. So not a lot of difference between April and the end of the year. That was 56 ADMs lower than what we had planned and 40 ADMs lower than last year. And we have also experienced a 2-year decline in special ed of 95 ADMs due to COVID and other factors. Our care and treatment enrollment was 112 ADMs, which was 47 lower than planned and 27 lower than the prior year. Donations for the month of June included $649 in checks, 1 autographed football from the Minnesota Vikings, and 1 vehicle donated to the Auto Tech program at HTC. Donations for the total year totaled $20,981, which is about half of what we had seen in previous years. There's a note here that many of the donations to South Education Center that occurred in February were not accompanied by a dollar amount. And so unless the donor includes a dollar amount, those dollar amounts then aren't included in that $20,000 figure. So, and then are there any questions before the board approves the June report?
You may. Just giving one more pause. Yep, go ahead.
I see it's an estimated value for the autographed football. Is that like auctioned off? And then what do you do with it to get the value from it?
I don't
Hang
know that
on to it and
anything has been
display
done
it?
with it at this particular point in time. So I have a feeling it is going to be part of a fundraiser thing at one of the schools.
Okay, if that happens, will the estimated value then, whatever the actual would be updated?
The donor gets to set the value. So
they set this value?
the value they pick when they set it.
I was just trying to figure out where the value estimate came from.
You have more info?
Yes.
I think the item in question, so North Education Center, as a part of their family night activity, I believe, this was one of the items that was donated. So they had items donated from a variety of different people, and those were raffled off. As families came in, they were given the opportunity, like you do at many family nights, to just get that, and that was one of the items they could have put their ticket in to try to win
Okay.
through the raffle. So they raffled off a variety of prizes that night, and that just happened to be one of the ones they got donated.
Yep.
All right, very cool. All right, thank you.
Didn't know what happened.
I happened to be there that night.
Did you win the football?
No, I didn't.
Okay. All right, I don't see any other questions or comments, so we could entertain a motion to approve the routine monthly finance report.
So moved.
Second.
Oh, boy. There was a motion by Ann Casey and a second by Ruthie Dallas. Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye and the motion is approved. We move next to a request to revise a resolution that we have already passed as a board. So I will let May explain more.
So I'm bringing forward a revision to a resolution you passed in June. Earlier in August, we were informed by the Minnesota Department of Education that the minimum adult lunch price is $4.95. Of course, after we had already passed our resolution at $4.75. So I'm bringing it back to you as it's a resolution. It has to be passed. The revision has to be passed as a resolution. So that's the extent of the change.
Seems very straightforward, but any questions before we take action?
Thank you for your detailed attention to this.
Yes. All right, we could entertain a motion to waive the reading and approve the revised resolution as presented.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Francesca Pagan Umar and a second by Michelle Kuntz. Any further discussion? Since this is a resolution, Shannon will pull the board.
Thank you. Don't need to vote on that motion.
This is what we're doing now with the resolution.
The waiving the reading
The
was part
waiving
of
the
the,
reading.
it's part of the
It's
whole.
all
one.
part
all
of
in
the
one.
whole, okay.
Whole package.
Just wanted to make sure.
Mhm.
I have a little dash to fill in. Yes, so Director Andreessen votes yes. Chair Brackey,
Yes.
Director Casey.
Yes.
Director Dallas,
Yes.
Director Johansson,
Yes.
Director Coons,
Aye.
Director Marty,
Yes.
Director Mosqueda Jones.
Yes.
Director Pagan Umar.
Yes.
And Director Sant.
Yes.
Did I miss anyone?
Okay,
So it passes 10-0.
fantastic. Thank you so much. Now it is Ann's turn at the microphone for the board business policy review and revision section of the agenda, where we have 3 items this evening. First up is a first reading of HM 200, the district's face covering policy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So with this policy, the administration is requesting that you accept the proposed revisions to the policy, which would bring the policy in line with the district's current practice with regard to face coverings. The revisions include notice that there's a possibility that there could be a mask mandate at some point in the future. And spells out what that mandate would look like if it were to come back in force. Director Casey and I have discussed looking at the language and maybe bring forward some proposed revisions to the second read that would reflect the fact that tonight you may adopt a resolution giving the superintendent authority to implement any pandemic measures that she believes are necessary due to public health guidance or other possible changes, recommendations. That's it.
So given that And since this is first read, this is not one that we need to take action on this evening or, okay, got it. Go ahead.
I'll just throw in that this was due to an experience that we had in St. Louis Park, where it just became very clear that the language that we were using was very much under scrutiny.
Mm.
And because it was really clear in our policy, we kind of got out of a really ugly situation. So I just wanted to be very clear in the policy, and I think as well as in the resolution, but I want to make sure that we're in alignment between the policy and the resolution, that the process and the authority for going back into a required mask mandate is in the policy.
Thank you for sharing that with us and finding a way that we can incorporate it into the second read, likely at our next meeting, I imagine. Okay. Any other comments or questions?
We have something similar at Eden Prairie, just because sometimes decisions have to be made too rapidly to convene the board, and I think it makes sense.
And thanks to Anne for responding to me quickly today.
Okay. So we will bring this one back at our next meeting, and we will move on to existing board policy HM 240, which is about COVID-19 required testing or proof of vaccination. And we are being asked to rescind this policy this evening. Share more?
That's correct. If I could just go back to the
Please,
previous policy. for a
absolutely.
moment. Our practice is with the second read to bring you a clean copy of what the policy would look like if you adopted all of the changes. So in board book, if Juanine will allow me, I'd like to put in two versions. The clean version with all revisions accepted, approved, and one that shows you the changes that Director Casey and I are moving forward with. So if you see two versions in board book, you'll know why that's happening.
Sounds great. Thank you.
So with regard to the required testing or proof of vaccination policy, it has been the district's practice for, I believe, several months during the last school year to not require the testing or proof of vaccination. And we are not requiring that this year either. So we don't need this policy any longer, and to leave it on the website would give a false impression. So we are requesting that it be rescinded.
Okay. Any questions or comments about the request to rescind before we take action?
I just had one clarifying question around practice. Are testing kits still available at a district level if an employee or family would request that?
We have some. If whether that's enough of a supply, I don't know, but we are looking at trying to get more.
Okay, great. I'm just thinking that if this policy is taken away, that might then not have resources available be as important. So just
Absolutely.
questioning practice.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
I don't see any other questions or comments. So again, because this is rescinding a policy, I can just read the language out loud, and if someone feels so moved, they can make the motion. I move to rescind existing board policy HM 240.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Sam Sant and a second by Heidi Marty. Any further discussion? And this one as well is a roll call vote.
Okay.
Keeping you busy tonight, Shannon.
Yes. Director Andreessen votes aye. Chair Brackey,
Yes.
Director Casey.
Aye.
Director Dallas.
Yes.
Director Johansson.
Yes.
Director Coons.
Aye.
Director Marty.
Yes.
Director Mosqueda Jones.
Aye.
Director Pagan Umar. Director Sant.
Yes.
And the motion passes 10-0.
Wonderful.
To say that.
Thank you. Next up in the trifecta is a resolution regarding decision-making on health and safety measures for this upcoming school year.
Yes, if for those board members who are new, this is very similar to a resolution the board adopted last year, which gave the superintendent the authority to be nimble if required. If public health guidance changed or case rates changed, for example, and the board didn't have an upcoming meeting that was happening soon, the superintendent would have the authority to implement any measures needed.
Great. Any questions or comments before we take action on this resolution? I imagine this is one we're all quite familiar with from our home district context as well. So we could entertain a motion, and again, this will all be in one, to waive the reading and approve the resolution as presented.
I so move and ask that we waive the reading of the resolution.
Second.
We have a motion by Sarah Johansson and a second by Heidi Marty. Any further discussion? And I believe for the last time this evening, Shannon, will you please pull the board?
Director Andreessen votes aye. Chair Brackey.
Yes.
Director Casey.
Aye.
Director Dallas.
Yes.
Director Johansson.
Yes.
Director Coons.
Aye.
Director Marty.
Yes.
Director Mosqueda Jones.
Aye.
Director Pagan Umar.
Yes.
Director Sand.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes 10-0.
Thank you. And thank you, Anne. So now we are moving into board reports. And the first item here is appointment of board vice chair, since Regina Neville has left the board. And as previously mentioned, Michael Birdman will be filling the seat from Edina Public Schools officially beginning at our next meeting. So thank you to everybody for just touching base with me. And thanks to Ann Casey for expressing interest and willingness in serving as vice chair. I appreciate that. And so I will nominate Ann Casey as the next vice chair of Intermediate District 287. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And then we will entertain several more calls for nominations as required. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Any other nominations for vice chair? Do I do it a third time? Yeah, that's all. Any other nominations for vice chair? All right, seeing and hearing none. There's a motion by Crystal Brackey and a second by Michelle Coons to nominate Ann Casey as the vice chair. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye. And thank you for your willingness to serve as vice chair. Okay, next on the agenda is a closed session. As allowed by Minnesota State Statute 13D.03, the school board may hold a closed meeting to consider strategy for labor negotiations. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you.
And second.
We have a motion by Francesca Pagan Umar and a second by Jackie Mosqueda Jones to move into closed session as allowed by Minnesota Statute 13D.03. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye, and after a brief recess, we will enter into our closed session.
Good job.
Thank you.
Coming back.
Right, just, had to shake a little bit of rust off, but
Yeah.
that's right.
No, you're right on. Oh,
Okay, I feel like we've had a lot of votes this evening.
so.
I heard no one else said.
First is on Tuesday, October 18th, for our care and treatment programs. And then you will see the rest of the schedule going through April 11th, ending at South Education Center. There is also the schedule for the Loco 2209 board breakfasts, which start on Tuesday, October 25th. So please look at these, let Juanine know. Those that you are able and plan to attend, as Michelle said earlier, they really are wonderful opportunities to be with our students and our staff and to experience our programs, as well as to speak with our staff directly. Last item on the agenda is once around the table, if there are any items that board members would like to share with each other. Go ahead,
I'll
Sarah.
just share, we have a new director of special services. It's Shanae Nias. She has some 287 roots, which is really exciting.
Cool.
And we are overjoyed that she said yes. So if you see Shanae along, we're really excited about her being part of our group now.
At the risk of being rounded out of the room, St. Louis Park has a new interim director of communications. It is Rachel Hicks. We are super grateful to Rachel and to 287 for putting out amazing leaders. I mean, that's the lesson to me, is just that our city, I had nothing to do with that. Our city hired Radius. So this district is putting out amazing leaders and bringing up amazing people. And I know that the people who fill those roles next will be similarly amazing and will go on to spread this this mission with the world outside. So thank you.
Yeah, we're just a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit.
And thanks to both Rachel and Radius. I know from Marcy that they are also helping to really source great people for the pool to fill their very big shoes. So we appreciate them for that as well. I don't see.
What are the things that everybody generally comes? I know what at Eden Prairie, I do a 287 update. What would you include in a once around?
It is very open. So a lot of times people will share staffing transitions that feel relevant to 287. Sometimes people talk about legislative things that a district is working on. I'm looking at Shannon because I know she has done that several times. Programs that are being developed. So I think anything that's happening in your member district or in your community that really feels relevant to our mission, to our work here, I would say tends to be the common thread of what folks choose to share. No requirements or parameters. Okay, with that, it is 9:04 p.m. and I officially adjourn this general meeting of the Board of Intermediate District 287. Thank you, everybody. What'd you say?
Is the DSC this?
Yeah, District Service Center, yep.
So many acronyms, and thank
I
you
know.
for